Hey guys, Big Red One here with Gamers Armada, and I'm here to deliver our latest review on Lord of the Rings: War in the North. As usual guys, I'm going to start with the good first. And the best thing about this game is that it is a Lord of the Rings story. It's not the exact story you're used to. In fact, it's actually very different because it focuses on a different fellowship that went north and paralleled what Frodo did, but they had a lot of different challenges along the way with different enemies. Specifically, a bad guy named Agendaur, who studied at Sauron's right hand and is actually his big guy in the north. So he's got a lot going on as far as gathering forces, and the fellowship you take is actually charged with stopping that gathering and preventing Agendaur from joining his forces to Sauron and Saruman and make things just a little easier for Frodo. The other good point about this game is the combat. And there's actually a bad point to it as well, which I'll get into in a minute. But the good thing to know is that the combat in its basic form is actually very good. There's a lot to do. If you hit them just right at the right time, you'll actually decapitate them, you will sever limbs, you'll knock them clear across the map. And there's a lot of cool abilities, whether you're the dwarf, the ranger, or the sorcerer. You've got either brunt abilities like you would if you were the dwarf, you've got some bow abilities like if you were the ranger, and the sorcerer has some pretty cool spells. The problem is using them in conjunction. The other issue is that it's also going to be annoying when you've got AI that just isn't very good because you don't know when to use your abilities because they don't know when to use theirs. If you need healing and the sorcerer's not around or just not healing you, you have to have potions. And if you run out of potions, well then you're kind of stuck. The other downside is the targeting. The targeting drove me nuts in this game because it only targeted where my character faced. It was hard sometimes and I'd find myself just swinging at mid-air because people would move and it wouldn't stick with the guy I was trying to attack. Small gripe there, but it definitely takes away from the combat. And unfortunately we're into the negative aspects of the game already, and I'll explain them as I go. The first thing is that the story, while a good story, just didn't seem to have the same kind of gravity I expect from a Lord of the Rings story. Maybe that's Peter Jackson's fault. Maybe he just did too good with his movies, or maybe J.R.R. Tolkien just did too good with his book, which he obviously did. But this game just didn't measure up. It was odd enough having Frodo, a hobbit, with a dwarf, an elf, and a human following him around protecting him, but now all of a sudden I've got another dwarf, another elf, and another human ranger, and they're on a different quest at the same time. It just seemed very formulaic and created. It doesn't seem natural, doesn't seem to flow with the history of the actual world that they live in. These races don't typically come together like that. So I didn't quite get drawn into it because I just could not suspend my disbelief. One small issue with this game that actually has a bigger effect than I thought at first is that you can only play one character at a time. You can't switch between the characters in the game unless you get out of your game and then load it again and pick a new character as you're going in. I played my game most of the time as the dwarf because I like his combat abilities. The problem was I would pick up armor and equipment for the other two characters in the game, the ranger and the wizard, and I couldn't tell them what to equip because the inventory system does not allow me to control what they equip. I can see what I have in inventory, and I assume that they have the same inventory as it's all shared, but I don't know what they're going to equip. Sometimes they'll have a sword in their hand, the next time I see them they'll have an axe, and I don't even have an axe in my inventory, which is weird. So I didn't quite understand how the inventory worked and how it would work with the other characters. You can give them weapons, like there is a specific option for you to give them an item. The problem is that they would equip it, and then shortly thereafter it would be gone again. You don't know why they didn't equip it or why they unequipped it, but they'd have a different weapon or they'd be wearing different armor. And again, sometimes it was stuff that I didn't even have in my inventory. So I was very confused as to where they got it or why they had it, and I had no idea what kind of damage they were doing either. So it was very frustrating throughout the game trying to figure out how best to equip my character because I didn't know what the other people were equipping themselves. Another issue that I found, which is directly related to not being able to change your character in the game, is that your characters have character-specific abilities that are passive that you don't even realize you have. For instance, as the dwarf, when I was running through mountains, I would occasionally find veins of gold in the mountain, and I would be able to extract gold from that vein and use that to sell it and gain money to buy equipment in towns. As the lore master, you might find herbs lying around and you could use them to brew different healing things or restore mana. The problem is that you can only be one character. So if you're walking around as the dwarf, you're not going to be able to pick up those herbs. And the artificial intelligence doesn't pick them up for you and do it automatically. So all of that goes to waste. Similarly, if you're not the dwarf, you're not going to find those veins of gold, and you just lost a good chunk of money because there is a ton of it when you go through the mountains. And I found that while this was a minor annoyance, I ended up missing out on some of the game. Not being able to brew those things and not being able to find that gold would be a huge downside to playing as one character versus the other. I understand that this may encourage you to play multiplayer because having another person who actually controls the character would be very useful, but if you're a single player person like I like to be, you're going to lose out on some of the game, and I didn't really find that to be very fair. If they had just included the function in order to be able to switch characters in the game, it would have been a lot more fun and functional, and I think it would have been a much better experience for me. Finally, guys, I know it sounds like I've complained a lot during this review, and maybe I have, but the honest answer is that I had a good time playing this game. It actually was fun. The battles were a little interesting, and they got you through point to point. But I just feel like the game wasn't very polished, and if it had more time, it could have been a very good game. My personal recommendation is not to buy this game. I would recommend that you rent it or wait for it to go on sale at your favorite digital distributor and then get it. It's a good game, I'm just not sure it's worth your money just yet.